your child is doing online? Is this a school friend online? Or is it online grooming? Cyberbullying, disinformation, online grooming, sexting, sexual violence online? The internet has no borders, and neither do cyber threats. How can we protect children in cyberspace? What consequences should we anticipate?
Welcome to The Dimension, Child Safety in Cyberspace. Thank you for coming. It is a pleasure to introduce the first speaker with the opening remarks, Ylva Johansson, European Commissioner for Home Affairs.
Thank you. When I crossed the border into Ukraine, something changes after the 24th of February 2022. War is no longer something I read in the news. It's a reality right here. The air raid alarms, the threat of dangers, family members at the front. For many of us taking part in this conference, we are only here for a few days. For the people of Ukraine, it's a reality every day for more than 2.5 years now. I admire you, the Ukrainian people, for your incredible bravery at home and on the front lines. Civilians and soldiers resisting the aggressor, defending your country against a much larger enemy, merciless, pitiless, ruthless. The European Union has stood by Ukraine from day one of the full-scale invasion, and we will continue to support Ukraine as long as it takes. Ukrainian children paid the price for Russian aggression. I think of Sofia, 14 years old, sitting on a park bench in Kharkiv, killed by a Russian rocket. War brings new threat. But old threats don't go away. So I applaud Ukraine. In the middle of a war for your survival as a nation, you are dedicating time, resources, and efforts to fighting sexual abuse. A reality all over Europe, all over the world, also here in Ukraine. In part because of the war. There are reports of Russian soldiers raping women and girls, even a 4-year-old child. But also because of the internet. Just last week, a media report from Poltava Oblast, the arrest of 2 men suspecting of raping a 12-year-old boy with a stick and sharing the video online. The threat of child sexual abuse is huge. In Europe, we estimate 1 in 5 girls is a victim. 1 in 10 boys is a victim. That means we all know someone who has been abused. And it's getting worse because of the internet. Only online can adults pretend they are children and trick children into sexual acts. Data shows an exponential increase of online grooming, reports linked to the European Union. More than 300% increase compared to the year before. More than 300% increase of grooming online in just 1 year in Europe. A predator needs just 8 minutes to build a relationship with a child, a British university study showed. Only online can people share abuse in an instant, thousands of times, millions of times. 15 years ago, internet companies who do the detection reported 1 million videos and pictures of child sexual abuse worldwide. Last year, the figure was 36 million reports. And these pictures shows rapes of often very young children. Internet Watch Foundation are classifying the different content in different categories. Category A is the worst content with the most horrific violence. This content, the category A, doubled in a year, up to 20%. When it comes to children under the age of 2 years, the category A content is 80%. And that's what Europol reports. The younger the child, the worse the violence. And these pictures and videos of young children, even newborn babies sometimes. I met with a father. A neighbor had raped his daughter again and again, from the age of 1 year until she was 3 years old. The perpetrator tied this little girl down with tape and raped her and shared the videos online. It's hard to talk about this. And I can tell you it's hard for you to listen to this. But we must do it, because 1 in 3 victims will never talk about their abuse. They will have this experience by themselves. Someone has to speak for the children. And I ask you to speak for the children. And I ask myself, why does the crime of child sexual abuse fill us with such horror? Is it because we cannot imagine anyone wanting to harm a child in this way? Is it because a child is so powerless and the abuser so powerful, so calculating? There are even pedophile handbooks with tips and tricks for catching children, with chapters like hunting season, sex with kids, with clear instructions on how far you can penetrate a 2-year-old or a 4-year-old girl before they start bleeding. We will put a stop to these pedo handbooks. Earlier this year, I proposed an EU-wide ban as part of an update of our criminal rules against child sexual abuse. I also proposed to criminalize new forms of child sexual abuse, including the use of artificial intelligence. We need to catch abusers and rescue children. That's why I proposed a law to oblige internet companies to prevent the sharing of child sexual abuse in online messages and to detect it if prevention failed, to report it and to remove it. And I should say it's time that we treat the internet companies not like teenagers. We should treat them like adults, because they are grown up and they should be responsible for what they do and what they don't. This is a silent crime, committed behind closed doors. Perpetrator abuse children offline, but share the abuse online, in completely ordinary messaging apps that we all use every day. And only detection by internet companies can find the abuse. In my view, it's our obligation to protect the children, our obligation as parents, as adults, and as politicians. I made it my priority as Commissioner to fight child sexual abuse, because a child has no power. But we do have power. You have power. So let us use that power together to end child sexual abuse and protect our children online and offline. It's actually our obligation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ylva Johansson, European Commissioner for Home Affairs. Child safety in cyberspace is a challenge faced by countries worldwide on a daily basis. The increasing threats in the digital space require a united effort and shared resources to protect the most vulnerable. It is a privilege to welcome each speaker and guest to the 4th Summit of First Ladies and Gentlemen today. Childhood is meant to be a time of freedom and joy, and through collective action, it can be made safer and more secure in the digital era. The first block, Best Practices Regional Response to Global Threats, can begin. Please welcome the moderator, Luukas Ilves, former government CIO of Estonia. The speakers are Igor Klimenko, Minister of Internal Affairs of Ukraine, Aleš Musar, First Gentleman of Slovenia, and Bo Tengberg, First Gentleman of Denmark.
So we have a not very representative panels of First Gentleman, male Interior Minister, male former civil servant. I hope you will forgive us. This topic, on the one hand, because we're talking about things at a distance, some of the horrors may seem almost more distant. But one of the things about online threats is that these are a threat to which no society has a solution. We know what safety can look like with regards to war, with regards to basic lack of access to material resources, and there are many societies where children don't suffer under those threats. But nobody has a solution to online threats, and it is something that we collectively have to find an answer to. I want to start off by showing you a little bit more data from the survey that was conducted in advance of the summit. It really is fascinating. So 3 very brief slides. First of all, if you can show the next slide, please. Unsurprisingly, children really want to be online. And while parents also think it's important that they use devices and use technology, children think it's more important. So next slide, please. And parents already do a fair bit to deal with what their children are doing. Whereby if you look into the numbers a little bit, there isn't a clear correlation between a country's level of development or technological savvy and how active parents are. So for instance, if we look at the first number, the number of parents already using parental controls, we see that in Kenya, it's almost twice as much as in France. But in general, parents are quite active. What's a little bit more polarizing is the question of whether it's the job of social media platforms to keep children safe. So about half of parents think it is. Now, if we go to the next slide, what is, however, interesting is that there is broad support both among parents and children to take some steps to really make the internet safer. As you're looking at this, I want to make a methodological note. The columns on the right, that is net support. So for instance, you see that at the very bottom, the question of banning the use of mobile phones in schools. Now, parents seem to be very much in favor of this. The plus 26, though, that doesn't mean that 26% of children want to ban mobile phones. It means 26 percentage points of children more want to ban than don't want to ban. So even a majority of children support banning mobile phones in schools, which is quite remarkable. But there are some other measures that have almost universal support, like asking for proof of age before using certain sites or services, and increasing the responsibility of social media sites, of technology providers, and maybe even banning some unsafe social media sites. So I think this is an important message to politicians, which is that actually your voters, and your future voters even, support you taking action on this. But with this, I want to start off with our 3 distinguished panelists, and first of all, to ask Mr. Ihor, I should say Dr. Ihor Klimenko, who is Minister of Internal Affairs of Ukraine, but also has a PhD in psychology, so also an academic view on this topic. What new challenges have emerged for child safety since the beginning of Russia's full-scale invasion in the last 2 years?
Доброго дня.
Hello.
2,5 роки війни.
2.5 years of war.
Оцінюємо, що ми встигли зробити.
And we're trying to assess what we've been doing
Змінюються наші діти.
to assess the situation, how it affects our children, how it affects their childhood.
І можу сказати, перше,
And what I can say is that, we looked
які нам були
at
надані
the figures
соціологічні дослідження, я думаю,
provided from the surveys. Well,
значно вищі,
I think there will be even
у зв'язку з тим, що в нас велика
worse
кількість наших
in Ukraine because a lot of our citizens, a lot of parents, they're preoccupied with the war. They're focused on the war.
Або багато батьків знаходяться,
They're either
жінок,
focusing on logistics or they're fighting on the front line, and it's been going on for a long period of time. So, how the war affected our children, first of all in cyberspace? Well, first, I'd like to start with the influence of foreign hostile countries against our children. Well, back in the days, the situation we had in social media and telegram channels, there was organizations like Blue Whale. They try to lead our children, to provoke our children to committing suicide using different challenges. So our enemy is doing the same for the last couple of months. They're trying to win children's trust, and they're asking children to make photos of infrastructure, important infrastructure or military site, get some information, set a car on fire, and that's the effect of the full-scale invasion, the hybrid war that's going on in the information space, and our job is to fight it. Our job as law enforcement agencies and other agencies and services, organizations, whose job is to make Internet a safe space. And there's more and more effect on our children, including in terms of informational influence. And let's not forget about the problems we had before the war started. I'm talking about cyberbullying, both passive and active, against children. This is what happens against our children, especially children who have no parents. And there's lots of crimes related to abuse. And also, speaking about AI, well, I guess we're going to have a new problem with the cyberbullying in the near future. And let's not forget about grooming, sexting. This is why we need to protect our children from that. For the last couple of months, we pressed lots of charges against Ukrainian citizens who, and hopefully the courts will make the right decision. Last year, we arrested a person who tried to abuse Ukrainian children, and we proved there were more than 200 cases. He not only tried to win their trust. Well, first, he pretended to be their peers. A young girl, and then he developed that friendship. After that, he tried to track some children. And cyber police, Ukrainian cyber police, is doing its best to protect these children. But these 200 cases, it's just one person. How many reports were filed? Not many. Children go to school since 7 years old in Ukraine. And we have to talk about that in school, but I think we have to do that in kindergartens. We need to understand what people have awareness, informational awareness, or cyber awareness. What is the age category? And there's a huge gap between older and younger people, and it leads to the situation where we fail to see what actually happens with our children.
Your commissioner has just mentioned what happens within the families, but we have to interact with our children, we communicate with them, which we do very little. So the social studies and research indicates that we have to listen to children. We ought to listen to them. Nowadays, cyber police officers get to listen to them, and some parents do so, to make sure that we can come to their rescue timely. And of course, destructive communities likewise, regrettably. Last year alone, we came up with a situation, we had a trend which is called Radan in one of the communities in the east of Ukraine. Children began to unite in some aggressive communities, and then they began to inflict bodily injuries to others or began to bully each other. So this was also one of the attacks of the Russian media, because Radan is a private military company, and some special intelligence services were trying to launch this virus in the midst of our children. We detected it timely, and when this virus, when this organization began to attack, began to spread its tentacles to another community, we got to meet the parents of those children, we talked to them, so in another town we prevented this action from happening, from escalation. Therefore, nowadays, we are faced with a challenge, not only on the front line, but we have another challenge to tackle, which is directly inside our country. So we have to be mindful that Ukraine these days is spending huge resources, human resources and the other types of resources. However, along with that, we are also unfortunately wasting our time and not taking care of our children. We're not rearing, we're not taking care of them, and that's something that is completely inadmissible. So what we are doing, we are working within the Interpol, and we have a lot of points of contacts. We have a lot of databases, and we enter a lot of information. We feed information into these databases. We exchange information, share information with them. We also have a databases of the suspects, the people that we are working with, people who are suspects on very well-founded charges, because they have already been accused of similar unfortunate abuses of our children. So this is a comprehensive approach of different means and actions that we need to undertake. So far, on behalf of the National Police, the Ministry of Internal Affairs, we have some juvenile policemen present in our midst right now, cyber policemen, officers of the educational security area who also are present within our school environment. And we want to do all we can in order to prevent cyber crimes and offenses. And they teach both children and teachers, school principals, to make sure that educational space is safer and secure. And just like I said, the trust, this bond which is forged between the children and teachers, and between the children and the police officers, all of this needs to foster openness, and this is the hardest thing to forge. All of this trust needs to be implanted there, because the children are the future of our country. And in the post-war time, although the war is still ongoing, we have already developed a comprehensive set of activities that we are going to use in order to secure our children, our future, from all of these criminals and perpetrators. And of course, cooperation, something that Ylva Johansson has already mentioned. Cooperation with the administrators and of very popular social networks that we also get to work with in order to identify and prevent such crimes from happening. Thank you.
And as the minister pointed out, we have a number of policemen and women with us here who, while they may not be on the physical front lines, actually see the front lines of some really quite terrible things. So I also want to give them a round of applause for the work they do. So I'd like now to turn to Dr. Aleš Musar, who is an entrepreneur, an academic, and also you have a bit of a personal passion for historical restoration. And what I want to ask you is, as you look at this challenge and you'll talk about what Slovenia has done, do you view this as an inevitable nuisance of the digital world that will be with us forever? What can we do to actually make this problem go away?
Yeah, this is actually the main part of the question. The cyberspace is not going away. We, over let's say 30 are eventually, and the world for the younger generation is completely different, let's say. So it's not removing cyberspace, it's finding our way there, because cyberspace and dangers in them, in it, it's really everything, everywhere and all at once. There is a whole spectrum of what is going on in cyberspace which can harm children. And I'm actually grateful to Commissioner Johansson to be so brutally frank about the sexual abuse in the internet, where we in Slovenia actually have an experience to share. This also refers to what the minister said about the sexual abuse online. We have grooming, we have sexting, we have production and distribution of children pornography, which are all classified as criminal offenses. In Slovenia, in 2011, we introduced new penal code where mere possession of pornographic children pornography on a computer is already a criminal offense. This enabled international cooperation much easier. This enabled the judges to issue warrants, and this, in a relatively short time, increased the number of prosecuted cases by 300%. You can take it as a recommendation, but the point here will also be that regulation, if conceived, implemented and enforced in a proper way, actually works. Now, on the other side of this spectrum, and in between are many things which the minister described, is something which seems quite benign. It's misinformation and disinformation. And if we go to the definitions of what is what, they're mostly based on intent. Misinformation is false or inaccurate information being spread by mistake or possibly by misunderstanding. And we sometimes add there, or without malicious intent. So it's kind of not white lies, but white disinformation. Disinformation, of course, is the same, but with deliberation. And with these definitions, we soon come to gray zones. For example, spreading disinformation really depends mostly on the people who take it seriously. And from their point of view, is just misinformation. And this is actually the whole plan. I mean, you cannot have millions of bots, you have thousands of bots, Russian, for example, and then you need a million of gullible people who spread this kind of information. So I would say that we might actually look more at the harm done. And the first question is there intent to do harm? And when we are at misinformation and the white disinformation, we should also ask ourselves, is that meant to be harmful, or is that just meant to provide some profits to the one who is spreading misinformation? And on disinformation side, it's actually quite clear. It is intended to do harm. And on the almost criminal side of that is what Ukraine is experiencing now in the field of disinformation, and what whole Europe, whole world is actually experiencing now in connection to Ukraine. We have it in our country. You have it here. I mean, disinformation can be entirely ridiculous. There was an incident in July which was quite, directly related to Madame Zelenska, accusing her of spending millions of euros for a new Bugatti, which was completely false, even with a falsified invoice from a non-existing Paris shop. But it spread around the internet. And if we look at what is the actual harm which is done, we should look a bit more carefully at the so-called misinformation. Because this is, not exactly crime, but it does make harm even when seemingly for, kind of good intentions. You have software freely available. You can download it now on your phones to beautify your pictures. because children, and not only children, want to look as beautiful as the others online. And those others, well, have already beautified their picture, so it's fake. They are following the lifestyle and images which do not actually exist. And this makes harm to children's health, in fact. Leads to anxieties, and this was actually recognized by the World Health Organization. Just in March this year, there was a position paper presented in Copenhagen with the intention of making the WHO European region the safest or the healthiest online environment for children. And this document, which is really very comprehensive, and I recommend everyone to have a look at it, lists, for example, unhealthy marketing as part of misinformation, which is there, lists data collection from children, which again is mostly intended for this or that marketing, and lists age-inappropriate content as health damaging. This document actually refers also to the other measures which were already taken, and most of them in the European Union, starting with the GDPR, which was already more than 10 years ago, and then going through Digital Services Act, which is from July this year, coming in force, Artificial Intelligence Act, and all this actually leads to the updated strategy of the EU called Better Internet for Kids. Now, we are hearing voices now that we should really forget a little bit about the privacy because this would increase profits. Do we really want to go there? It's like saying that we should forget about the emissions, for example, and the environment, because that also would improve our profit margins. So I would stick with what Europe is doing, because I believe that we are actually on a way of doing regulation, as Commissioner Johansson said, to make the platforms accountable, not treat them as teenagers, as she said. But of course, having rules is not same as having safety. There are fake news on the internet which are sometimes difficult to recognize, and this works as the same for children as for adults. In fact, it actually works on adults sometimes even better than on children. In Slovenia, we are trying to fight that. We have at least 3 portals, some with the government support, to unveil the truth behind the news. There is also one cross-border initiative, the Adria Digital Media Observatory, together with Croatia. This is fighting fake news one at a time. And this is, although really useful, not quite the solution. There is a portal also aimed specifically at children with instructions how to make your own internet experience safer, and that's also for teachers and parents, and that links directly with a phone line where children can call if they have problems online. If there is something more serious, like any trace of sexual abuse online, there is another, it's called WebEye, where you can anonymously report it. Fighting one by one, fake news one by one, is probably not the answer in the long run. And the guess now is that the answer is that children should be able to recognize fake news by themselves. So it is probably about education. We have actually good examples about that. Media literacy, there is a great example from Jordan, Jordan Media Institute, which has good results. But to do that efficiently, 2 questions remain. First, who should be doing that? And what we are really fighting against. The who part, if there was time, I would like to say a few words later. And for what? I think Bo might have some answers.
And with that brilliant transition, we hear finally from Mr. Bo Tengberg, who is the first gentleman of Denmark, and also, everyone should know, a filmmaker. So we might say in modern parlance, a content creator, although I hope not the kind of content we need to be protecting our children from.
Definitely not. I don't hope so. But I think it's an interesting question, and it's hard to answer about content of the. I think we have a great, as producers of content, we have a great responsibility. I totally agree with the speaker, Ms. Ylva Johansson. Whether it's, as I do, produce content for cinema, TV, or it's online, it's a great response what we deliver to our children. And I would say I'm very lucky that I think that I grew up in Denmark. I grew up with very good children's television, cinema, and I think at that time growing up, the producers of the content were very aware of the educational value, the entertainment, of course, and the warmth of the stories that we tell our children. So, and always remain the respect of the children and talk in eye heights to them, which I think is very important. I would like, and I hope I'm not going to bore you with it, but I would like to talk a little bit about own experiences and the experiences in my home country on content and in the internet, because I think there's a very important matter to the ways of looking at content for our children. I'm not sure and I'm a parent myself of three. My oldest son is among the audience, and actually, as I mentioned in the opening speech today, my son told me he thought I was so lucky growing up in the 80s. And I really wonder, why do we think that? And one of his major arguments was actually you grew up without the screen. And that made me think, okay, so if he thinks that, what is it the screen presents to our children? And I'm wondering, do you know what your children are looking at the screen? I certainly realized I didn't. When they grew up, they were small. So some good colleagues of mine in Denmark produced a TV documentary series that would translate to something like Alone on the Internet. And what they basically did was interview children about what they were seeing. What are you watching? And some of the children were very honest, and also honest in saying that they never shared with their parents. Their parents didn't have a clue what these children were watching when the door to the room was closed. And what they did in the TV program was afterwards they made an interview with the parents, and they, with the children's permission, they told them the answers from their children. They even showed them clips of what their children were watching on the internet. And the parents were quite shocked. What our children are exposed to in cyberspace is beyond my imagination. With algorithms designed to keep us glued to the screen, we'll always get more and more of what we show interest for. And I think part of the human mind is searching into the dark, and that the algorithms certainly help us do that. So some of these children told us what they watched. They were exposed to beheadings, men bowling with human heads, people getting their limbs torn off, car accidents, a man killing himself online by shooting himself in the head, and the list continues. It's already mentioned some of these terrible things they are watching. The children were telling about how it was difficult to sleep after watching these reels and how the pictures kept returning to them in their mind. And therefore, one of my points is we got to be very, very attentive to content and to. I think we have a huge responsibility to not let our children, young children, enter the internet unprepared and unprotected. Of course, we're not the only ones with the responsibility. I would like to turn a little from my homeland to some American data. I just read, and I would highly recommend it, a book by American psychologist Jonathan Haidt called The Anxious Generation. And this professor of psychology is analyzing and looking at people's youth and children's use of social media. And the mental health and the effect on mental health. So, from the 80s, if you see the figures, the curve of, you could say, numbers of different kind of mental challenges to children is more or less flat. And something happens around the year 2010. Between 2010 and 2015, the curve goes straight up. And it's the rates of depression, anxiety, self-harm, suicide, and some of them more than doubling. Major depression among teens, girls, would, in this short time span of 5 years, would raise major depression among teen girls would raise with 145%. With boys, it's 161%. Anxiety would raise 134%. Depression, 106%. ADHD, 72%. Bipolar, 57%. Anorexia, 100%. Self-harm among girls, 188%. Suicide rates for younger adolescents, with boys it's 91%, with girls it's 107%. And so what happened in 2010? I guess you all know the answer, I'll tell you anyways. It's not that I believe in totally monocausal thinking. There's always different reasons for things to happen. But there's a tendency here that we need to pay attention to. 2010, according to this psychologist Jonathan Haidt, began the great rewiring of childhood. We went from what he calls a play-based childhood to a phone-based childhood. So, Facebook bought Instagram. We're talking about the period from 8 to 10 and up to 15. This is when Facebook bought Instagram. They invented the like button. Smartphones got the facial camera for selfies. Social media became, with that, a culture, I would say, of judging each other. And I read a very interesting psychological survey about happiness. And it turns out on Facebook, if you like and buy into the reality of something posted on Facebook, actually the correlation between numbers of likes and your personal unhappiness correlates totally. So the more you like, the more unhappy you get.
Mr. Tengberg, if I can slowly cut you off, I want to have a chance to ask all of our speakers one question.
Yes.
I want to have a chance to ask all of our speakers one question.
Yes.
Yes. So if I can ask you to just pull it together, and then we have time for one question for each of our speakers. So I want to start maybe with Dr. Klemenko. If you had one silver bullet that your allies and friends or the global community could do to help you right now on this question, in addition to the many challenges Ukraine faces, what might that be?
Well, we talked about that. We have to end the war first. And that's the first thing. And then we have to be engaged in a peaceful life. And we have to pay more attention to our children and their childhood, because this is our future. We need to restore the country, and it's impossible without the children and without their safe future.
Thank you. Dr. Musar, you wanted to say something about the who.
Yeah, it's actually about the perception of reality. In Harry Potter, you have a quote. Is this real, or is this just happening in my head? And the answer is, of course it is happening in your head, but why would you think that it is not real? And this is something where we, over 30, I'm sorry you included, have a different perception of the world. As, for example, my son, who is 23, or your son, who is sitting there. They know consciously that there was time before internet. They also know consciously there were dinosaurs roaming the world, and it's about there. And we are from that time. For them, the world is different. The boundary between digital and real doesn't exist that much. And the trusted one on the internet are not authorities, are peers. We have to ask that generation to do the work in the cyberspace. That's my opinion.
Good. And Mr. Tengberg, what tools do we need in the future to do? What do we need in the future to do a better job? Like, what are the tools we have to be developing?
It's very difficult to talk about the tools, and I think there's hope for the future. I think it might be so that history will judge us quite hard for being a generation who let our children let them loose on the internet without any control. But also, I think there's a great hope for the future. I mean, I had the luck of traveling on the night train here to Kiev with the two youngsters, one of them my son, and the other one was the young Dylan Douglas. And having this long night talk with these guys, we have to remember that the internet provides them with information. They're extremely smart, clever, much more knowing than I was at that age. So also, there's a lot of positive sides. I didn't answer your question because I don't know the answer.
I think you've summed up the panel actually perfectly, which is, we spent the last half hour looking in a sense at the dark underbelly of what is also a very positive phenomenon. And we'll hear in a moment about what Ukraine has done positively in the digital world too. And it's a challenge to sort of muster all of the different tools, the legal tools, the operational tools, but it's something we have to do. And it's also something where we can have successes. So I think if there's one takeaway from this discussion, it's that we also shouldn't get depressed as we look at all of these challenges. These problems, these terrible things that our children can encounter, they should goad us to action. And they should goad, as we will hear in the next discussion, our international institutions and our digital platforms to action. And I want to thank all three of our distinguished panelists for laying out the challenges, talking about some of the solutions. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
We are ready to start the second block. International collaborative efforts, industry and organizations. The video message by Yen Drennan, Executive Director at We Protect Global Alliance.
It is an honour for We Protect Global Alliance to take part in the Kyiv Summit of First Ladies and Gentlemen. As many children in Ukraine face disruptions to their lives, the digital world must be a safe space, free from exploitation and abuse.
We Protect Global Alliance brings together governments, private sector, civil society and intergovernmental organisations to foster collaboration, to share knowledge, to empower underrepresented voices, and to come together to deliver effective advocacy for long-term sustainable solutions. We know that we're facing a public health emergency. We need to act. If we don't, we're not going to be able to look future generations in the eye and say we did everything that we could to end child sexual abuse online. We need to move from the inevitable to the preventable.
Out of challenging circumstances, it's been inspiring to see Ukrainian ingenuity and innovation in the digital space. We look forward to future collaboration. Every child, no matter where they live in the world, deserves to be protected and safe from harm.
The speakers are warmly welcome to take the stage. Moderator, Luukas Ilves, Annette Kruber-Riehl, Vice President of Government Affairs and Public Policy at Google in Europe. Katarina Kruk, Regional Public Policy Lead Central and Eastern Europe at Meta. Thomas Davin, Global Innovation Director at UNICEF Office of Innovation in Sweden. And a special video message by Stefan Mergenthaler, Head of Strategic Intelligence and member of the Executive Committee at the World Economic Forum.
So this is where it gets interesting. I think the discussion we just had, in a way, threw down the gauntlet. And it threw down the gauntlet for our technology companies, who do a great deal of good. And I also want to say, you've been recognized many times for this, but have also done a great amount to support Ukraine in the last 2.5 years, but who also are the purveyors of a lot of what we've been talking about. You clearly are not responsible for creating some of the nastiest content, but it does reach people through your platforms. And then there is the broader question of mental health and how, more broadly, we continue to live flourishing lives also with the dangers of digital addiction. So, but we also have another institution here, UNICEF, which has been working to protect the children since the end of the Second World War. And so you face the challenge of taking this mandate, which is, shall we say, unchanging in time, and updating it for this new era. And so I think we have a wonderful chance to hear from all three of these institutions on how they're all well-intentioned, how they're doing their work. And also I hope you can reflect, frankly, on the challenges, because it isn't easy for many of the positions that you're in. So we're going to start with Google. Or I should say with Alphabet and Google. So Annette Kruber-Riehl is the Vice President of Government Affairs and Public Policy for Google in Europe. Annette, please, the floor is yours.
So thank you, first of all, for having me for this panel and for the invitation to speak at the summit. And I would also love to start by saying I hugely admire the courage and the resilience of Ukrainians. It is impressive, even if you're just here for a couple of days, to witness the resilience of the people here is inspiring. So obviously, and this is the reason why we have dedicated this summit to children. The children are, in particular in times of war, the most vulnerable. So I think, as you pointed out, and as we have heard before, tech companies play a huge have a huge responsibility, and I wanted to maybe walk you through what we are doing, and then obviously also address some points we already heard. So when we, next slide please. When we think through our responsibility, we look at 3 keywords in particular. It's protect, respect, and empower. And obviously this all starts, next slide please, with the baseline protections that we have built in our product. In our products, and I just named two, it's safe search and search, that is filtering for children. And then we have very strict guidelines on YouTube. So, and you see the other protections for the other tools on the slides. But up, next slide, please. I knew this is going to. Tech is obviously only as safe as the way we use it. And therefore, we want and respect families to decide how their children accessing the platform. Bo Tengberg just mentioned, well, it also takes the parents and the families to engage on the topic and to understand what the children are doing. So this is why, and that's a very important point for us. And that's why we have family link and parental controls. Next slide, please. We also empower kids, can also explore YouTube in a specially designed way. So we have YouTube for kids. It's having very strict protections, but in the background, but allows children to explore the internet in a safe space. And we believe it's important for children to experience this, and hence created this quite popular platform. But next slide, please, I think. Yeah, it is not only, obviously not only what young people do online, but how they use the internet. So how they can protect themselves. Here in Ukraine, we have successfully engaged with the government. I will speak about your ministry in a moment, but with the Ministry of Education and others, we have, actually, that's with the gentleman didn't have the issue with the hair and the wind and the microphone handling at the same time. So Be Internet Awesome is a platform, is a project initiative that provides tools to actually educate children, parents, how to stay online on this internet. Next slide. But, and I only have 5 minutes and some slides, hence I'm powering through. The online experience is changing enormously through AI. It's the elephant in the room. It hasn't been addressed yet, but it's obviously accelerating the topics that we are discussing today. So it's really important that we also empower the next generation of AI innovators idly. And we have created a platform that is called Teen Gen AI Literacy Guide, which is complicated to pronounce, but it's a fantastic tool to learn how to use AI safely right from the start. The Commissioner has mentioned at the beginning that we all need to work together in order to fight child sexual abuse online, and I just want to flag that we indeed are engaging in her initiative and in her activities for years. Applaud the Commissioner for all she has been doing in the last years to promote the topic and get it as well as we can. The scale of the content is gigantic. So yes, we need also in this space to use AI to detect and remove CSAM, and also to detect and remove a CSAM, AI-generated CSAM, child sexual abuse imagery. Yeah. But all of these efforts that I just spoke about only happen in partnership. And I have to say I'm deeply impressed, really impressed about the commitment and depth of the cooperation that we had a chance to engage here in Ukraine with the government, with civil society, with NGOs. And we really want to do more, and in particular on the top of AI, that is such a gigantic opportunity, but also a risk. So I'm very pleased to announce this afternoon that we have increased our funding of the Raspberry Pi Foundation and will work together with EdCamp here in Ukraine, to set up a program that is called Experience AI, and that is meant to support educators on how to use AI and for their purposes. So I only had 5 minutes. Let me close by saying children indeed are the most vulnerable group, and we have no choice but working very, very closely with each other in order to make sure they're as secure as possible, online, offline, and Google is for sure committed to playing a huge part in it, and we feel our responsibility, and we are doubling down as much as we can on this topic. So thank you.
Thank you. So we're next going to hear from Katarina Kruk, who is the Regional Public Policy Lead for Central and Eastern Europe at Meta, better known as Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram. You have the tools that many of us use to communicate with each other, although both of your platforms are losing out to TikTok these days with the youth. But anyways,
I won't comment to that statement. It would require a totally different panel.
Yes, but we also want to hear from you on what Meta is doing and how you're protecting our kids from the evil that's lurking out there.
Sure. Let me start again with thanking to this distinguished audience and to have an opportunity to discuss this incredibly important topic, not only from the perspective of the challenges, quadruple challenges that Ukraine is facing, but also overall how our platforms are dealing with the topics of safety and well-being of youngsters online. And when we were discussing the potential angles for this panel, and knowing that we'll also have our colleagues from Google who in many cases would have the similar approach of how we're approaching teens, the responsibility of platform, we actually discussed that it will be probably best you spend time if we will be focusing more or less on the specific tools. There are lots of parents in the audience, there are lots of people who are working with children and with child organizations, and there is lots of important information which is not only about ideological, how we approach the topic of safety and well-being of teens, but what specifically we're doing in this realm. To start it point blank, obviously we are incredibly aware of the challenges that our platforms are posing. It has been named a couple of times on the previous panels, and while we are very incredibly proud that Instagram is one of the still very much used and popular among the teens, together with this pride comes a sense of incredible responsibility, because we know the youngsters out there, and even though we have the policy that prevents creating accounts below the age of 13, we know that unfortunately this rule is not very often respected, both by kids but also by parents who aren't always thoroughly following what their kids are doing online. That is why when we're approaching this topic, we have to approach it from the perspective both content and policies, how we approach the content being circulated online, but also products. And before going deeper into presentation, I would like to say that when it comes to products and tools, we're incredibly proud that in Ukraine, together with Cyber Police, we have launched a couple of years back the product called Amber Alert, which in a very significant cases of when we're talking about potential child abuse, but also kidnapping, when we're talking about the existential threat to the life or to the health of the kids, we have additional tools that Ukrainian government, Ministry of Interior, but also Cyber Police have in their disposal to share as much information as possible around the time and around the place where the kid has been last seen, in order to ensure that obviously we can find and secure kids as fast as possible. So when it talks about content, we have very strict guidelines overall, which are being based on our community standards, but we have additional guidelines also for the accounts of kids below 16 or 18, depending on the local regulation and how the youth and the teens have been defined. What is especially important to remember is the content that is also engaging people in the suicide, self-harm, eating disorders. So some of the important things that have been shared on previous panels, not only from the perspective of pure sexual abuse and sextortion, but also the things that have incredibly strong impact on the well-being of the kids. Another thing that we are doing beyond removing content that is strictly violating these policies is we know that sometimes the content can be borderline, and this is quite often being abused by perpetrators. That is why we're using also our tools to downrank so-called sensitive content. And this is specifically important for Ukraine because these tools tools are also being used for the content which depicts graphic violence related to the war. Ukrainian kids, unfortunately, are very much exposed to the very graphic nature of what war atrocities and war crimes are. In some cases, they are witnessing them themselves with their own eyes, but in cases where it has been happening wider and in different places, we think that it's incredibly important to shield these kids from information and content that can be so incredibly damaging. And obviously, we have zero tolerance policy when it comes to CSAM, which has already been explained as sexual abuse content and grooming. Next slide, please. When we're talking about the product side, we are making sure that when it comes to the tools which are at disposal of both kids on our side, when, for example, we're shielding and making all accounts of kids below 16 or 18, depending on the country, private by default. We also give a wide range of tools, which goes in dozens, but I would like to focus on a couple of those, explaining how we give a wide range of different instruments that would allow teens to guide their experience online. Because as was rightly said in the previous panel, the kids that from the very young age are exposed to internet and overall to digital technologies, they're already very much aware of how to use it. And sometimes what they need is obviously a nudge and availability of various tools. So again, having their accounts being private by default, using artificial intelligence to prevent adults and understanding that adults might be lurking, looking, trying to follow accounts of teens, having what was actually mentioned about the likes, there is a possibility to hide the like button, obviously, and there are additional controls when it comes to messaging and commenting, even up to the point when you can filter what comments or what messages can come through this shield. So, for example, there are some swearing words, there are some ways of conducting bullying and harassment, and kids are being protected for that. I will go immediately into the next slide, but just say one sentence about the fact that we're also encouraging the health relationship with ads and internet in general. So we have reminders about time that is being spent online and how kids can take breaks from what is happening. We are using AI, and I wouldn't stop that much on this slide because this is something that is used generally, but not only to prevent and stop the content which is being shared online, but also to be able to find the accounts of teens who haven't provided the right age. So we would be able to understand that we are working with the youth, with representatives of this category, and we can use all of the tools and instruments provided. Next slide, please. We also believe that it's incredibly important that it's not technological companies and kids who have availability of different instruments. So also family is involved, and parents together with their kids, they can create the safe and useful modus operandi for each other. And supervisory tools are incredibly powerful, and we have created lots of different trainings that would be explaining how exactly to use these very powerful tools. And when we go into the last slide of my presentation, which shows that none of the good things can be done alone, and what is incredibly important to understand that, of course, likes of Meta or Alphabet, they have a benefit to invest in lots of different resources of creating the best tools possible, but we aren't the only ones, platforms or apps that are being used by teens. That is why we have to work very strongly, both with regulators, with civil society, with governments, with various experts, on finding industry-leading solutions that will prevent grooming, sexual distortion, abuse that is happening online by providing the policies, first of all, by age verification and parenting control, which we believe is best happening on the platform level, but also providing content policies which are safe and secure across the internet.
Good. Thank you very much for the work and for that presentation. Now next, Thomas, Thomas Devant from UNICEF, you have been watching to a whole bunch of your constituents, as it were, stakeholders, governments, all of whom ultimately come together under the UNICEF umbrella. How is the world as a whole moving? Is it moving fast enough?
No, I don't think it's moving fast enough, but I think it's an evolving function of the technology as well. Technology is moving so fast that it's not just government that have trouble keeping up, it's that even technologies themselves are struggling to keep up. And it's interesting because the Convention of the Rights of the Child was created 35 years ago, and so was the World Wide Web. And when I was hearing about the anxious society, I was connecting it to the World Wide Web actually. So it was interesting that maybe it's a little bit towards that direction. I've heard so much fascinating content, so I'll try to maybe put some added thoughts. So first, the sense of the scale of the issue. I think we still are under-evaluating the scale of the issue, right? The we've just done a study in 12 countries around sexual exploitation online, in 12 countries in Asia and Africa. And we are actually at 20% or 22% of children saying, and adolescents saying, they have experienced sexual exploitation online in the last year alone. 20% in the last year alone. So this is probably, even the numbers are probably higher. The mental health and social anxieties are exploding, and they seem to be exploding year after year after year. So the scale is incredible. The pace is faster than what we anticipate. Maybe our questions are also not going fast and far enough. And I'll give you maybe 3 questions that I myself am struggling with. The first one is, are we, through what's happening right now and the addiction that is being created, seeing a progressive retranscription of how the brain plasticity of the children and next generation is actually being reformatted in some ways? I know I'm struggling to read, and I'm not under 20, and I think that we should, as a society, ask ourselves that question about what is going to happen to the brains. Is that good, bad? Can we live with it? We can, of course, live with it, but maybe taking those questions. Are we, in the algorithm that we use, creating a society where we're going to have smaller and smaller bubbles of people who are going to look at the content of people they care about and trust, and we're going to lose that sense of society, community, equity? Are we potentially looking at a population group that is going to struggle to understand what is facts or truth, or what they are going to vote for, because they might not believe in whatever they see? And what is that going to mean for a society to function as a society? So those questions are maybe even further along than what we're currently struggling with. I think a lot of efforts are being made, really, not just by the industry and by governments, but parents are starting to also understand, really connecting with children, adolescents, and young people are online. The creators of the likes are coming together. A number of the software engineers that are working in those large organizations are creating their own foundation to say, okay, we need to look at different ways. We are probably also going to need to ask ourselves, how far do we take that? So you were talking about young people like internet. But a couple of years ago, you would have asked a lot of adults, do you like smoking? And the answer was, yeah, I love smoking. Do you like drinking? Yes. Do you like sugar? Yes. And we are maybe not courageous enough in saying, how far do we take that, right? We know that there is a TikTok for China and a TikTok for the world. Should that ask us questions in society? So maybe those elements, we are still, I think, acting mostly on what we see and what exists, and maybe not trying to anticipate what will that mean longer term. But the technology is also an incredible tool, and I really want to end with that. Not just on managing mental health, we're connecting. I'm sorry, I haven't followed the presentation at all. For whoever is managing the slides, thank you. We are working with companies to try to understand, can we use music and Spotify to reach children with psychological support and mental health in Ukraine and elsewhere. We are working with chatbots to help children feel safe, and they don't have to be judged by whoever adults they don't want to talk to. So technology is there to help us. We are starting to use that more and more intelligently. And across so many sectors, technology is a game changer. When we look at the ability to use machine learning and AI for personalized training and teaching and skills, this is potentially going to change the way for millions of kids. So I want to also join the fact that this is not just a dark side that we're looking at. There's many, many positives, and we should not forget that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Last but not least, we're going to hear from Stefan Morgenthaler, who is Head of Strategic Intelligence and a member of the Executive Committee at the World Economic Forum, in a pre-recorded video.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the World Economic Forum is pleased to have a long-standing relationship with Ukraine, including both with the government and its private sector. We are particularly honored to welcome First Lady Zelenska to our annual meeting 2023 in Davos, and value her contribution to the CEOs for Ukraine session and press conference, where she highlighted the work of her foundation. Today, it's my privilege to share this video message with you, aimed at fostering an important discussion on ensuring the safety of children in the digital age. While digital progress brings remarkable opportunities, it also introduces new risks, particularly for children. As the youngest and most vulnerable users of technology, children face too many and increasing threats, including harmful online content, misinformation, addiction, privacy breaches, and fraud. In response to these challenges, the World Economic Forum has launched the Global Coalition for Digital Safety, which aims to accelerate public-private cooperation to combat harmful content online. The coalition brings together leaders from industry, government, civil society, and academia to develop innovative solutions that address these digital threats. By fostering collaboration, the coalition seeks to exchange best practices for online safety regulation, take coordinated action to mitigate online harms, and drive forward programs that enhance digital media literacy. We're pleased to have Mr. Mikhailo Fedorov, Vice Prime Minister of Ukraine, as a valuable member of this initiative, and thanks for his leadership in this regard. A key component of the Global Coalition for Digital Safety's efforts is the Digital Safety Risk Assessment Framework. This framework provides a systematic and collaborative approach to identifying and mitigating risks in the digital environment. It offers a comprehensive method for assessing online safety risks, enabling stakeholders to evaluate potential harms on digital platforms and implement effective safety measures. Another important work stream of the World Economic Forum on digital safety is the Media Information Literacy for Tackling Disinformation initiative that focuses on equipping individuals with the skills and knowledge to identify disinformation. An upcoming report under this initiative is dedicated to identifying the best tools and practices needed to critically evaluate media content. By equipping young people with essential skills, we can empower them to differentiate between trustworthy information and dangerous disinformation. At the heart of the mission of the World Economic Forum is the commitment to improving the world through trust and cooperation. These principles are essential for creating a safe digital environment for children. Protecting the youngest and most vulnerable citizens required shared responsibility and proactive measures. Let us come together in this effort, taking bold collective action to safeguard children in the ever-evolving digital landscape. Ladies and gentlemen, there's no doubt that Ukraine has emerged as a global leader in digital transformation, setting an example of how innovation can strengthen the relationship between citizens and government. In order to leverage Ukraine's strengths and capabilities in government technologies and create new global partnerships, the World Economic Forum and the government of Ukraine have embarked on a new and exciting collaboration. The Global GovTech Center in Kiev, the second of its kind in the Forum's network of centers for the Fourth Industrial Revolution, will serve as a hub for developing cutting-edge governance solutions in the digital space, helping to advance shared objectives such as fostering inclusive technological opportunities and strengthening Ukraine's leadership in digital transformation. We're truly excited about this new partnership and confident that it will play an important role in improving digital safety. Thank you very much for your attention and have a good meeting.
I want to try and summarize in 60 seconds what we've discussed over two panels.
Because the lip syncing and the sound were not really...
You should ask him next time you see him. So I'm going to try and summarize in 60 seconds. I think the big theme, the meta theme in all of this, is that frankly, we did a little bit too little too late in the last decade and a half, collectively. Governments and platforms, international institutions have made a strong effort, and I think we're now getting to the point where maybe the tide is turning. And the challenge we face as we enter this next stage of the digital revolution with AI, which many of our speakers have alluded to, is that we not repeat that pattern. That we build on the momentum we have, the awareness that governments have, the efforts we're making, the efforts that platforms are making, the the foundation that legislation now gives us to act on some of these dangers, to be a bit more proactive as the next round of digital threats emerges, both the bad guys and perhaps the more pervasive threats of addiction and dependence. I have confidence that we can do it, but that's going to require goodwill and cooperation on everyone's part, and it's going to require new innovations that we're going to hear about in a moment from my former Ukrainian colleague. But first, I want to ask everyone here to give a big round of applause both to our three wonderful speakers now, and to everyone who spoke about this topic this afternoon. Thank you very much. Thank you.
As this block ends, sincere gratitude is extended to all speakers for their dedication and valuable insights, and to the moderator for expertly guiding this discussion at the 4th Summit of First Ladies and Gentlemen. The exchange of knowledge and experience across nations and collaboration between industries and organizations play a critical role in addressing global challenges. These contributions are bringing us closer to a future where children are safer and better protected in cyberspace. And now welcome Valeriya Ionan, Deputy Minister for Eurointegration at the Ministry of Digital Transformation of Ukraine.
Hello, dear ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Ukraine. Today we have spoke about cyber threats and about regional and global threats and responses and how we can do better together. But today I would like to end this panel with telling you a little bit more about what we are doing here in Ukraine with digital transformation, how we are thinking about it, and speaking a little bit more about digital literacy. Well, first of all, we have the big vision. We want to build the most convenient digital state in the world. And we are very proud that Ukraine has been called a European digital transformation tiger. For the past 5 years, we have implemented a huge number of digital reforms, and probably one of the most prominent and efficient ones is our DIA ecosystem, which has 6 different projects. The cornerstone of the DIA ecosystem is our state super app DIA, which is used by more than 20 million of Ukrainian citizens and has 19 digital documents, more than 30 digital services and digital signature. We also have a state portal of public services DIA with more than 130 services available, including the fastest business registration in the world. We have a service like DIA Engine, which is a low-code open source solution for creating state registries, DIA Business, a great project for the development of SMEs, DIA Education, DIA City, it's a virtual regime for IT companies. And basically, since 2019, we are trying to conduct on a regular basis the research on digital literacy. Because if you want to build the most convenient digital state in the world, it's important that citizens have at least basic level of digital literacy, and better, not just basic and higher, because digital literacy is as important as the skill how to write, to read, and generally digital literacy is something which makes us competitive today. Another project of our DIA ecosystem is DIA Education, which is a national edutainment platform for reskilling and digital literacy with more than 2.5 million users and with more than 180 educational series in edutainment format, microlearning format, open for everyone, to scholars, to youngsters, people of different professions, people of elegant age, which are available both in Ukrainian and in English. And we are very, very grateful to our partners, to Google.org, who supported us in this great project. I would also like to mention that we have a special section on DIA Education, which is devoted particularly to online safety, and we lots of guides for teachers, for parents, for scholars, specifically on online safety, which is again absolutely free for everyone, as well as we have a separate section on interactive simulators, which are related to concrete educational series, and again, which are related to specific target audiences, especially to scholars, to teachers, and to parents. We do a big emphasis on this in order to prevent and to teach and to explain about the possible future threats and how to secure yourself. It's also very important to say that we have a separate button to report unwanted content, which we are doing together in partnership with Stop Crime. And we also have a separate section where everyone could test his level of digital skills. We have tests which are called digigrams, which are based on European frameworks Digicomp 2.1 and 2.2. And out of this, we have done several more tests, like, for example, cybergrams. And 13 out of 15 is average score among users of the platform for cybergram, for example, specifically on de-education. We are doing a lot of communication campaigns in order to introduce the platform and introduce all the opportunities to Ukrainian citizens. And I would like to show you one of the examples. So usually we are doing several different videos which are targeted and which explain some concrete benefits of using the platform and importance of cyber hygiene. This is the example of the ad, which is coming, by the way, today for our new product, which I will tell you a little bit more later.
The best way to play is while knowing no account at my favorite game will be stolen, because I have really strong password. Be cool like Cybersafe. Register on DIA Education, boost your cyber hygiene, and do game over to thieves.
So today we are launching a separate section on our DIA Education, which is okay, sorry, we have some technical problems with the mic. Hope everything is fine now. So today we are launching 1, 2, 3. It's working. Should I wait for several seconds? I should wait, sorry. I'm looking for a sign. Okay, I see that we'll have some technical change. It always happens with me for some reason. The technology stops working. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Now it works. So, for the third time, the spoiler, which not the spoiler already, we have a new section on de-education, which would be devoted to cyber hygiene, and which is, open for particular scholars and, people of elegant age. And there are very great edutainment series, which I recommend to everyone because they really give an understanding on why it's important to have digital literacy, what is cyber hygiene, what opportunities you can get, and how you can protect yourself from those threats which are waiting somewhere outside. We also do have a separate section which is devoted to the new updated computer science, which we called IT Studios. So that's basically computer science for scholars. There is a separate section on DIA Education, and we do have a lot of components of digital literacy and cyber hygiene, which are already embedded into the new educational program. And we won't stop there. We will continue to update the program on a yearly basis, and that's what we are doing right now. We also do have a great project which is called CDTO Campus, which aims to prepare the new generation of digital leaders for public service. And now this is mainly the project for CDTOs or digital leaders who are about to start the position. But we are thinking about working with young generation and motivate them to come to the public service and teach them and make them fall in love with digital transformation. Another great thing is Maria, is our new big thing which is coming. Actually, it is already tested in beta test in 40 schools, and we hope that from the next year we could scale this project as well. So basically, this is a project which is available right now for scholars, for teachers, and for parents, and that's a new revolution of education because it will be fully based on AI with a personalized learning trajectories. So we are working on that. Now it's beta, but we understand that AI tutoring, we understand that personalized learning trajectories, this is the future where we have to move, and that's what we are working on right now with our team. We also have presented the Global Ukrainian Innovation Vision Win-Win last year, which contains 3 main pillars: the Ukrainian innovation ecosystem, then ways to strengthen the innovation ecosystem, and priority directions where Ukraine has to invest in order to make a huge economic leap. And I'm proud to say that we have 2 great directions out of there. Actually, all 10 are good, but 2 are very keen to my heart. The one is cybersecurity, and the second one is EdTech, which I think is also a great sign and signal on how we move and how Ukraine prioritizes the topic of security. And as our colleagues from World Economic Forum already said, we are very happy, very excited, and very honored that this year we plan to open the second GovTech Center of WEF in Kyiv. The date will be announced hopefully soon, and we are very proud of that, and that actually means that Ukraine does something right in the sphere of digital transformation. And I would like to say with that we are really grateful for your participation, for your support, for you coming today here. And, you know, Ukraine is very open for partnerships, and we could build the bright digital future together. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you for being with us. The Dimension, Child Safety in Cyberspace, has ended.